This conference will
introduce.
now be recorded.
Should I say? So what I want to do is just quickly, very briefly, introduce you to the Southern region. So some people may have been around when Southern region was around, many years ago, before my time anyway, and it's kind of back in time. So what we've done over the last few months or so is introduce a new operating model. So it's taken a bit of a time to bring into play, but we're kind of here now. So the operating model simply is there are 5 regions now in Network Rail that is sort of made up of 14 routes, and they're supported by key central functions, as you can see in that sort of matrix. So we form part of the Southern region, and we support and are made up of the Kent route, Sussex route, Wessex route, and Network Rail High Speed. And as you can see, you've got the other regions: Eastern, Northwest, and Central, formerly LNW, Scotland, and Western and Wales. So within Southern, how are we made up? So this is a simple way of trying to put how our organisation works on Southern, which is, the main aim of Network Rail's reorganisation was around putting passengers first, and that's sort of code for putting passengers and freight operators first. And that's, with the arrival of Andrew Haynes a couple of years ago now, that was his focus on making Network Rail a more customer-centric, passenger-first organisation. So at the centre of our region are the 4 routes: Sussex, Kent, Wessex, and High Speed, but also stations. It's kind of a virtual 5th route for us because we hold, quite a lot of London terminals. London Bridge, Charing Cross, Cannon Street, Waterloo, Victoria. So and Clapham and Guildford as managed stations as well. So stations in itself is kind of a virtual 5th route, for want of a better phrase, and they are supported by what we call Southern Vital Services. So, I sit in asset management and engineering, but there are other functions such as finance and capital delivery, to name but 2. And ultimately, our goal is to support the routes to deliver what they need to deliver for our passengers and freight users, and that's the culture and the attitude that supports our operating model on Southern. That might be slightly different context to some of the other regions, but that's certainly the way we've been going. And then we rely on Network Rail wide services, supply chain operations, the technical authority, and others to help us deliver what we need to do on Southern. I had a few org charts to kind of go through, but I think that gives a good context to how the Southern region operates. Now, the main thrust of today was around giving you guys an introduction to what we're calling the track risk-based management. And I'll give a bit of background to it, but ultimately this is, an opportunity that I've taken as the regional engineer to move into a much more risk-based approach in our day-to-day management of the track asset. There are existing work streams, risk-based maintenance being the main one, that is a sort of formal reliability-centred maintenance activity that you can utilise, but it's very specific, and actually some of the aged asset we have on Southern doesn't quite lend itself to that approach. So this is something of a bit of a hybrid between the two. But the background to it ultimately is the tragic event of February last year, when Tyler was sadly struck and killed by a train in the Surbiton area. And that prompted us all to think about, actually, how do we go about our business? So, ask ourselves the question, why do we send staff out onto the asset whilst trains are running? What is the actual need for those inspections and maintenance activities to be carried out in red zone? We need to make our activities more risk-based, and fundamentally we thought we needed to change. Now there's ongoing investigations and everything else still going with RABE and our own internal ones. So please, nothing I say in here is in any way a intimation or a conclusion or in any way linked to the findings that may come as part of those investigations. So, please detach yourself from, the reaction, and what I'm going to go through is a sort of indirect consequence of Tyler's death, rather than as a direct, solution to what led to it, because that's still subject to investigation, and we need to let that run its course. So ultimately, we're in a bit of a conflict here between, I say conflict, but there's kind of like, as always, a sort of trade-off, a balance, an iteration you need to go through, where maybe up until the Tyler's and beyond, when we've had an increase in number of near misses, and Margam happened in Wales a couple of years ago, that really did put an impetus behind the track worker safety programme. But track worker safety principle is to minimise, and you might want to say eliminate, the exposure of our track inspection staff or track staff to lines open to traffic. But equally, on the other hand, you've got the need to manage train accident risks. You need to keep the track asset safe. So what does the track section manager need to do to be confident and assured that the track is safe to run trains, to pick up serious defects and control those risks and mitigate those safety risks that are associated with that, to understand that the track, how you understand the track deterioration and how it's happening, in what way, and is it quick, is it over a long time, and then to be able to prioritise your plan. So what do you need to do to maintain the asset, and what do you need to do to propose renewals in the future? And you can see there's a sort of natural tension or conflict there between the two. And I think we have to accept the fact that that conflict and tension is always going to be there. Every time we deploy our staff out there, we expose them to a risk. But equally, if we didn't send our staff out to deliver activities, we would live with an unacceptable asset risk. And we need to find the right balance. And you might say that the more we have sent our staff out red zone, we have controlled the engineering risk or the train accident risk at the expense of track worker safety. You could say that. And what we're trying to do is find the right balance to meet our overall objectives, because ultimately, one of the key things we're here to do is for everybody to go home safe every day. And I don't think any of us want to be in that position again, where we have another alert such as Tyler's or Margam. So what's the plan? So what we've done is we've taken the Surbiton event and looking at a risk-based approach to track management. So it's not risk-based maintenance in the formal sense, but it's taking a step back and saying, what can we do to support the track worker safety programme and eliminate unassisted lookout warning as we've signed up to as a business? And as the regional engineer for Southern, in collaboration with the route engineers and the track maintenance engineers on the front line, what can we do to introduce that focused risk-based approach? So we did a bit of consultation, and we came up with sort of 8 phases that we need to kind of focus our efforts on, and those are listed there. So I'll come on to the sort of some examples in a minute. And they are as a direct prioritization, really, around, what do we need to do that take up quite a lot of our red zone activities sort of yesterday, and what do we need to do for tomorrow to eliminate or reduce that at all possible. You'll all recognise those activities, I guess. So the first 2 are clearly basic visual inspection. That's the send patrollers out every week, every 2 weeks. That's we need to deal with that. Supervisor visual inspections and detailed asset inspections, and of course hot weather. So we're now going to get to that stage where we're sitting with 25, 26 degrees. So it's a track engineer's nightmare, and I'm sure Jordan and co are not sitting overly comfortable, as any track engineer would be this week, and so on and so forth. Underneath that, in the blue box, are things that they would be underway, and we are looking to deliver those activities as it stands, but ultimately they've become even more important as a result of this programme. And I'll come on to some of those in a minute as well. So phase 1. So what we find at Surbiton, and again, please don't take this as in any way leading to a consequence or a conclusion in line with the findings, but what we did pick up as part of our initial review was that there's a conflict between the way that the track patrolling diagram in our standards say you need to have a diagram that tells you how you patrol your S&C, and depending on the configuration of a 4-track railway, because as you well know, you'll all know in different parts of the country you get 2 slow lines, 2 fast lines, you get 2 up lines, 2 down lines, and all that makes it a really interesting difference when it comes to how you deploy red zone with lookouts in a safe system of work pack. And what we were finding actually is there was an inconsistency as to how our engineers in their track patrolling diagram and safe system of work were managing the crossovers that may have led you into an open line that would have taken you beyond your safe work pack limits. That may have done. So we're not saying that this was actually tangibly live in a lot of places, but we picked up the fact that this was a potential risk, so we needed to close that risk. So phase 1 was around trying to identify all those crossovers that your safe system of work, as those examples in the diagram show, that you may have picked up the green line is where you're protected by lookout warning, but the crossover that the track patroller diagram would have driven you to inspect would have led you into an uncontrolled situation. So this was around an activity to sort of resolve that by either including those extending your line blockages and extending your safe work pack if you could to include it, and for those that you couldn't because operationally and logistically it was just too difficult to do, we've brought in a risk-based approach, which is you can relax the frequency of that crossover inspection from a basic visual inspection perspective based on its usage and its line speed. So if it's not a crossover that's never used and it's 20 miles an hour, actually the need to walk in the forefoot as a patrol is the staff risk far outweighs the risk of the asset. When you can take a look across, you can easily see if there's anything obviously wrong with the asset, and then at a much less frequency go and do a tactile inspection in that forefoot. So phase 2, and this is where we get into some interesting conversations around risk-based management. So we've introduced a risk assessment, and we are early in its implementation. So we've rolled it out, and the engineers on the front line are beginning to use it. So we're still in the sort of early iteration stage of it. So it will change, it will evolve, as you'd expect. But this is around giving engineers and section managers a risk assessment to assess the ability to move their S&C basic visual inspection to nights or in nighttime inspections, and or increase the interval. But it's based on condition. So this is a risk assessment. We'll record the key issues that we expect to find from a BVI. You record, how many times you've had it in the last year or so, and it gives you a condition output. So it gives you an idea of the asset condition, whether it's good, satisfactory, poor, or very poor. And what we've done is we've effectively taken what the current standard says, which is BVI and S&C. If it's a shallow depth concrete layout, you inspect it based on its track category. But what that doesn't do is actually tell you distinguish between a really good asset, so it's brand new, it's just been relayed in the last 5 years, it's in really good condition, compared to an S&C layout of similar construction type in a similar operating environment, but may well be 30 years old. And this is where this allows a bit more of a risk-based approach to life, where we're kind of pushing our efforts to the good assets that are performing and behaving themselves and are in a happy operating environment, while we send in staff out to inspect that more often than it needs to, and focus our energies on the poorer condition asset, and actually put our efforts into fixing some of those requirements. So again, this is a key step forward in my mind around risk-based management. It's early in its ether, so I think give it a year, we can come back and have a conversation around the success or otherwise of that approach. Linking into it though is so you can then take a step forward to we've moved around our inspection regime, we've moved our staff to nights, we're doing a lot more inspections at nights. And what happens if the inspection doesn't happen? So we needed to come up with a response to that, because as you can imagine, when you've got your staff on days in red zone, you're a bit more flexible in how you recover your inspection regime. So you might have a patrol in the morning, and for whatever reason your line blockage or patroller was sick or whatever, you could be a bit flexible and probably move your resource around and go and do it in the afternoon with someone else or do it the next day. When you're in a line blockage situation or green zone situation, the ability to react in such a way to a line blockage being refused. So, on a Monday night, you go in to do your inspection and somebody's gone sick, or the line blockage has been refused for whatever reason. You can't just replan it for the Tuesday night because you've already got patrols and line blockages in place for the Tuesday night patrol. So we very quickly worked out that we needed to do something to avoid the cascade of change that would come if that event happened. So we've again taken the similar principles around condition, construction, and have you got any urgent faults to help engineers say, well, again, my BVI was planned between A and B on Monday night. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the asset that can't wait another week for us to come back in next Monday night. Actually, we should just stick to the plan. Avoid change. You avoid causing a bit of chaos in the planning team. People then make mistakes, and you could end up in a bigger safety risk by changing the plan rather than sticking to the plan. So this risk assessment, again, is not something that's necessarily within our standards currently, but it just formalises the ability for people to risk assess that and stick to their plan. So phase 3 was around supervisor visual inspection, so phase 3A, I should say. And again, it's a very similar approach, but takes in a wider spectrum and links to condition and failure history in line with the risk-based maintenance RCM analysis, sort of the failure modes that sit within that. But the principle is the same. You assess the asset, you come up with a condition score, and then you flex the intervals by which you are able to move your inspections around. And of course, by linking it to RBM failure modes, that's a tried and tested and a proven and actually approved process within Network Rail and within the industry. None of this goes beyond the boundaries of that at all. So we're just taking it in and tailoring it to Southern Region that gives us a bit of a halfway house between current 001 standards, the full RBM regime. This sits somewhere in between. So again, the risk assessment is quite straightforward. You populate it, you fill it out, and you come up with a condition score. And again, it takes us from a position where the standard says supervisor inspections, you do the S&C every 8 weeks or whatever that looks like, you do your plain line every 16 weeks. This now takes it into a condition hierarchy as well, which is if it's in good condition, you can actually push out the interval further so that you're focusing your energies on your higher risk assets, your poorer condition assets. Now, again, that principle's been agreed. We're beginning to roll that out across the region. And again, that will be subject to the similar feedback and iteration around what works well, what doesn't work well, so that we can progress that over time. So when we started this in sort of March, I think it was still snowing in March from memory, and so hot weather couldn't have felt further from the truth. But we're kind of finally there with regards to some hot weather. So we knew that there was going to be a significant challenge ahead around if as a business we've signed up to unassisted lookout working through the June and July era. Blimey, it's going to get hot, and we deploy watch people out onto the asset during the day, during train operations, to conduct those duties. Well, there's a direct conflict that the two cannot match. But what we can't do is kind of then ratchet up the hierarchy that the current standard would say, which is if you don't have a watch person on site, you ratchet up and put a speed on. So we'd end up in a situation where reputationally, as a business who are here to deliver the service for our passengers, we'd be putting on hot weather speeds pretty much from mid-morning all the way through the day. And in the end, you can imagine we'd end up putting 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions on from the start of service to the end of the day, which reputationally is not really what we're here to do. And it's kind of not risk-based, is it? It answers a question, but doesn't deliver what we need. So what have we done? This was an interesting challenge around trying to get a devolved organisation of 5 regions together with the technical authority to come up with a consensus around how we might do something different with regards to hot weather watch duties. We did come to a consensus to some extent, and we introduced a hierarchy of mitigations that can be implemented now prior to putting the speed out, should you not be able to put a watch person on site, which are things like inspecting from a platform, from a station, from an overbridge, from a vantage point, for want of a better phrase. I think that's probably been used in the past as practice, but hasn't really been formalised. So we've taken the opportunity to do that. We've also taken the opportunity to actually allow people to properly use other temperature monitoring systems. So there's a load of product approved bits of kit out there, remote temperature monitors that ping a temperature to a server, to heat guns, to all sorts of things that are available for use. And we've taken the opportunity to really amplify that approach. We've also allowed for the observation of track under traffic from a position of safety in some cases, and that is subject to meeting some criteria. And that's rather than having the need for a watch person to be in and out of the forefoot constantly. I'll come on to a bit more detail to that, because that's quite an interesting change. And it also allows that, you know, if you can fully observe the site from a position of safety and monitor the temperature, then there is no need for you to be on the track at all. And again, I think it would be accepted that there has been an element of that practice over the years, but our standards have just not quite reflected that. And the guidance was really based on some principles, which some interesting statistics. But the key thing, of course, is do your hot weather preparation. We should never lose sight of the more you prepare your asset, the better position you'll be in. So, of course, you know, that's got to be the key to everything that we do. But 80% of track buckles over the last 10, 12 years have happened on lower category track. And that's an interesting statistic in itself. And actually then the theory was that maybe the train service frequency on those lower category lines should allow you to get line blockages in the main between trains to hot weather duty. So again, you can make it safe in a green zone environment by implementing those line blockages. And the acceptance is that you know, Cat 1A, 1 and 2 are higher speed, higher tonnage routes, you know, will be more modern construction, broadly speaking, and therefore more resilient to you know, to the heat than the lower track categories would be. But what we've done in Southern is kind of take that a step further. And I won't go into the detail because that's quite, you know, we spend ages going through step by step. But the principle here is that there's a clear hierarchy now around how you could go about deploying your watch persons if you cannot meet the requirements of the standard in the first place. And of course, the first question we should ask ourselves, can we monitor the site from a position of safety and monitor temperature? If so, do it. That you are able to say that your watch person is on site and you're able to react if a buckle was to happen. If you can't do that, but you can take line blockages after every train or you know, within a reasonable frequency to observe track under traffic, then again, take that opportunity and do it. It's safe for the staff, and we're providing that real surety of the safety of the asset. If that then isn't available, because again, the train service doesn't quite lend itself to that, or the location of the site doesn't quite lend itself to it, or for whatever reason, then there are other mitigations that we put in place. And as the regional engineer and with the support of the route engineer teams, you know, we've taken the opportunity to properly write down that actually, you know, there are some risks within hot weather management. So timber S&C and joint to track, you know, is much more unpredictable than concrete CWR or big concrete S&C layouts, and we should recognise that the approach should be different for that risk profile. And equally, the key thing is you need to be robust in your CRT, critical oil temperature calculation. So I didn't say a stat in the previous slide, but actually there are a significant number of buckles that happen every year where they either aren't on the register or didn't have watch persons deployed because they were miscalculated or not calculated correctly. So if we can satisfy ourselves that actually we have a real robust view of the CRT, so we know exactly what the risk is, our standards actually are quite clear. That you deploy a watch person, and that watch person at CRTW is there to monitor temperature and then to implement the speed restriction when it reaches the next threshold. But our standards don't say you need to do anything else. So our track is safe for line speed within that window. And equally, by extension, once you put 30/60 speed on at that threshold, our standards say that the track is safe for 30/60 line speed until it meets the next threshold. And then by extension, again, the temperatures rise, the risk increases, but at that point you put the CRT 20 on when you need to, and you can be safe in the knowledge that haven't calculated the CRT correctly with the factor of safeties that are all built into our calculations, that the track is safe for the passage of trains at those speeds. Having somebody there observing trains over that asset gives us that additional peace of mind. And then, once you get to CRT 20, that kind of logic stops there, because that could be at quite a low temperature and there could still be a bigger increase through the day. So we've put in an additional requirement there that at 3 degrees above CRT 20, you then have to take a line blockage, or you put a 20 on adjacent lines. And similarly, if you haven't been able to validate the CRT calculation, you need to take line blockages to agree to at an agreed frequency to satisfy us that the track is safe for the passage of trains. So I didn't want to go into any more detail than that. I'm happy to pick it up in questions, because that's quite a change in thought process as much as mindset as much as anything else. But for me, I don't think it's a massive change in how a lot of section managers across the country have had to manage hot weather duties over the years, and this is a step into building that process in around observing trains over the track. Because ultimately you don't deploy watch people in the forefoot when trains are running. You observe the track after trains have passed. But there's opportunity for the future. So we won't get there for this week, clearly, and this summer. But there is a lot of work going on in the background to really push this, to push a technology solution. So just imagine there a day where you could put some form of monitoring on the track. I've put 3 stars there just to kind of cover off the length of a buckle, but there's some detail to be worked there. That monitoring gives you temperatures, and it gives you an update and a time stamp and a temperature and a change. And that temperature monitoring is already ready-made equipment. But what we want to add to that is something that would also give you an indication of alignment fault. Now, clearly that buckle would be unacceptable, but of course it'd be nice to have an alert that the track is beginning to move, because track shouldn't move. And it would be nice if a watch person was there on the CES with an iPad or a device with an alert that says the temperature is rising, and also there's an indication of movement. At that point, take mitigation action and go and investigate. And that's where we want to get to with hot weather management. So we eliminate the need for the subjectivity as much as anything else that's involved in hot weather duties. Okay, the last phase that I'm going to go through is sort of phase 4. So track geometry. So phase 4 is around what other maintenance activities do we do during red zone working, and one of the main ones will be level 2 rectification. And I just wanted to kind of prompt a bit of a principle debate here. I haven't got a solution to it just yet. I'm working on it, but I'll leave that thought hanging and see where the discussion goes, or just leave it like that for a period of time. But our track standards say you record the track. So it's quite simple. Track geometry must be recorded on all passenger lines, etc., etc. And that's our critical limit. And that's the frequency by which we do track geometry management, as nominal planning frequency and then maximum interval. So do not go beyond 10 weeks on your Cat 1A, 80 weeks on Cat 1, etc., etc. And once you record the track, you rectify the faults in line with the timescales published. And that's all fairly straightforward and logical. But what we've done is we've bolted the track geometry train and the PLPR, plain line pattern recognition, which replaces BVI. We put them together because PLPR is dependent on geometry output, and we now run geometry outputs every 4 weeks. Goodness. So we're now running every track category across most of the region now at 4 weekly, i.e. we treat every bit of track as a Cat 1A for geometry purposes. But our group standards say you must correct twist faults within 7 to 14 days, and you must treat other faults at a timescale commensurate with the risk of derailment. And at the minute, our track standards will just go back to say you must do this. So gauge faults you have to rectify within 14 and 28 days, top faults within 14 and 28 days, etc., etc. But we're recording the track at a much bigger frequency than we ought to. So is that risk-based? Open question. Is that risk-based? Well, of course it isn't. And how do we balance that over-recording of track geometry versus the requirements to repair within industry standards? And also, we want over-recording of the track because it gives us a real indication of how it's behaving, but not if you have to react and send our staff out to a red zone environment to repair faults more often than maybe we ought to. And then the concept of guilty knowledge. Is the concept of guilty knowledge preventing a more risk-based, pragmatic approach? So that's as far as we've got to on that front. There's definitely more work to be done over the coming weeks and months to try and tackle that problem. And you know, there's definitely more thinking to be had, but I'll leave that particular one there. So on to some of the exciting stuff, the future opportunities. So currently we are in the process of developing a S&C video inspection again. We've attempted some of this stuff in the past and for whatever reason haven't managed to make it stick. So we're having another bite at the cherry. We've grabbed hold of 3 Class 153 units, and we are currently fitting them with cameras and using the AI VR platform and using some route plans. We are aiming to do some meaningful trials on the Wessex patch, mainly because there's parts of that are already gauge cleared for 153s. So we don't need to worry about rolling stock introduction on that bit to get the trial going. We're planning to do that, so that becomes a real game changer with regards to video inspection of our S&C, run it over. We're aiming to put some twist and some gauge channels on the train as well to give us some basic geometry, and that would then be able to replicate supervisor vision inspection as well. So that's an exciting development, and we're hoping to really get that underway back end of the summer. So once we get up and running, I'm more than happy to kind of come back and give an update. And the other things we're working on are some drone trials. Drone trials, and I was very skeptical to start with, but I think there's a huge opportunity for that, and that's your image on the bottom left. And also, we were looking to see what we can exploit from our plane line pattern recognition footage. So believe it or not, we run PLPR, as I say, every 4 weeks, and we run it around the network, and we sign off our plane line through pattern recognition. We capture images as we run over all our S&C. And at the minute, we kind of record it and put it over in a box somewhere. So we're seeking the opportunity to see how could we piece the images together and look at what pattern recognition may look like, or indeed present the information in a way where a visual inspector could have a look at it and see if we could supplement our BVI rather than fully replace it, but supplement it with some video footage. And what I'm just going to do now is show you all a little bit of drone footage, just to show you the opportunity that exists with the way that drones will give us real information to help us with this challenge. So there's no sound, but I'm happy to let it play, and we can have a conversation and see what you think.
I suggest let's just run the video for a few minutes, Colum, because I think it would be quite interesting for the guys to see the quality, the resolution of the images that can be achieved.
So I think this is where, you know, things like markings on the ground, so maybe nameplates to tell us which road we're on, which direction of traffic is, what point number it is, you know, the looseness of bolts. You know, if you just put a Tipex line or you know, the old lorry telltale signs, for want of a better phrase, you know, there's some real work to be done. But I think you can see quite a lot that maybe we all thought wasn't possible with drones.
Yeah, and of course, I suppose, Colum, you can view this footage as many times as you like. So
absolutely, you can repeat it and pause it and you know, really have a discussion as needed. And equally, you could probably do some rough measurements with that, couldn't you, Jordan? You know, you could look at that joint gap and say, well, based on the scale, that joint gap's fine. You know, it's
yeah,
a couple of mil.
no risk at all, or something we need to get out and have a look at. Yeah,
absolutely. So there's just one other video then I just wanted to show, because it's a top-down video, and I think this is where, again, you know, through trials, this is all about what are we trying to achieve, and we're very early in our thinking with drone footage. But you know, this is from Western, and there's some real interesting footage and interesting, you know, things you can pause, pick up. And Jordan, as you say, in the comfort of an office, you can take your time to pore over this stuff and really get a good feel for how the asset, you know, what the condition is, what's missing. You know, the looseness is obviously an issue we need to get over, but there's more than enough here to help supplement basic visual inspections rather than fully replace them. But certainly we need to take the opportunity that this technology will give us.
yeah, I've not seen that footage, Colum. That's much better than I thought it was going to be. That's quite amazing, isn't it?
There's a whole hope of opportunities, Jordan, with regards to just, you know, even just getting better cameras on it. Now, battery life is the biggest challenge, so you know, it eats battery life. But equally, this is early days. But you know, there's some real high quality footage that took me by surprise when I first saw it as well. And there's a huge opportunity.
I know when Colum and I reviewed this yesterday, I have to say I was quite pleasantly surprised with the quality and the sharpness, the resolution, and bear in mind this drone's, you know, a couple of 100 feet up in the air, and the ability to zoom in over the asset and get, you know, whether that clip's missing or whatever, you know, it's really quite astounding. But I guess, you know, with the technology there, why not use it?
Of course, it doesn't pick up everything. You know, crack fish plates will be difficult, and crack crossings, etc. But I have to say, you know, we have to kind of change our mindset. Do we assume that BVI foot patrolling under traffic, under trains, in and out of the track with lookout warning or whatever else, or having to give up your line blockage, or having 5 minutes to run through the track with your line blockage in place, etc. You know, is that 100% effective, or do we assume that's 80% effective? And depending on which angle you come at, you can sort of say, well, actually, this is a real complementary activity to give us an improvement in our asset management approach, without you know, assuming that you're going to see an increase of risk as a result of combining the two inspections together. I think it covers quite a lot of the things that you may miss during a BVI, as much as you know, missing things through both. Okay, I think that there we go. We'll leave it at that. I don't want to run that for another 7 minutes. Okay. So,
okay, so thank you for that, Colum. We have a couple of questions in the chat, which I'll read out for you. The first one's from Phil Edwards, and he says, with the future of Great British Railways, where hopefully the relationship between infrastructure and train operation becomes closer, is there an opportunity to have a timetabled window, say on a Sunday morning, to do daylight routine track inspections for high risk locations under blockages?
100%. I mean, if the formation and move to Great British Railways doesn't give us the opportunity to at least open that discussion up, then what's the point? So interestingly, even just today, I'm having conversations with one of the head of asset and track maintenance engineers on a particular area with particular challenges around this conundrum, which is the asset condition is borderline with regards to moving it to nights when the TME isn't very comfortable, and at the minute the line blockages are classed deemed too disruptive. So the train operator at the minute say we're happy to accommodate some changes, but we need the DFT approval. And that's just because of the current structure of the industry. And absolutely, I think there's a real opportunity with GBR where actually you don't even need to get the DFT involved. That's something that we as Southern regions should just be able to resolve through sensible and open conversations and give trade-offs. If we don't need to take line blockages, on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, whatever else, but you give us Sunday morning, or maybe not Sunday morning anymore, maybe weekend leisure travel becomes the industry's midweek, Monday to Friday. But yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to exploit as part of GBR, and I think my reading of it all is that's one of the main drivers for the industry, evolution in that direction.
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
Just as one last thing. When we were in the alliance, on Southwestern Railway, Southwest Trains with Network Rail at the time, pre the current franchise, we did take out a couple of trains in the evening to extend the nighttime possessions at Waterloo, for example, to allow better production work. So it can be done when you've got collaboration and you've got a mechanism that you take away the commercial barriers that franchises and stuff kind of have in the way, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a comment from me. Thanks very much for that. Apologies, I got mispronounced your name earlier. Sorry about that.
No, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah, but in my perception is that I can't back this up with any data, but as soon as you get to start looking at a 4-track section and you're looking at the 2 middle tracks of that 4-track section, the risk profile goes right up. And if there's a mechanism to enable inspection of those 2 middle tracks in a 4-track section, such that you can get a timetabled line blockage, which is regular, so that it's not something that you have to request on a case-by-case basis. It's always there, and it enables you to inspect those 2 middle tracks, because it does seem to me, and you gave the example of on Wessex, and I don't know whether the issue was that the inspection guy was in the 2 middle tracks or not, but it just seems that whenever you get that sort of situation, or you're close to junctions where and you don't know until the very last minute which direction the train is going to weave its way through the junction and all that sort of thing. So there's particular places, hotspots, isn't there?
Oh, very much, yeah. And hence why drone isn't the answer fully, but boy, can it give us a reduction in that risk. The S&C video train, if we can run that train up and get it crossover as well and run away again, all adds together, and PLPR footage on that S&C that runs through. We must be able to piece those bits of information together to give us comfort that the asset is safe this week and safe next week and isn't deteriorating and all that good stuff, and only send our people out when we really need to. Because I think you're right, Phil, there's some risks that we've probably lived with for too long in those pinch points, and now's the we need to change. And I said at the start, now's the time, and we should take the momentum and run with it, which is what we're doing.
I've got another one, if I can just, while I've got the mic, sorry. But there's a particular hobby horse that I've had over the years about people going out and putting protection down in a live junction situation. And what I've lobbied for in the past is moving the position of that protection away from the junction further to enable so whenever a block road man walks out and puts lamps and detonators down or whatever it is, that they're doing that well away from the junction. And I was really upset to hear of a fatality at Stokesnest Junction a few years back, And I think there was another one that followed it quite closely afterwards, if my memory serves me correctly. And I really felt down about that, because for years and years I've been personally, I know others have as well, been trying to get some sort of change to the rule book to try and help us to avoid people going out into stepping over live conductor rails on busy junctions in the middle of the night, putting protection down. So it's another one that I would kind of add to your whole portfolio of scenarios where people are going out on the track, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've specifically focused on sort of track engineering aspects of life, sort of for today's purpose, but certainly the track worker safety program nationally and within the region are definitely focused on that live third rail issue, and certainly, you know, through track renewals over the last, you know, many years now on S&C, you know, track isolation switches are installed by default as part of the renewal, you know, so we are working in that direction, but, you know, I know there's a plan in place, but I haven't got visibility of it, and I wouldn't be able to speak with authority or with any real confidence, Phil, around meeting that. But certainly, this Stokes Nest fatality was equally shocking, and you know, the industry is doing a lot of work around it. I don't have anything to hand that would give any real detail or shine light on that, unfortunately.
No, I wasn't expecting you to either, really. I just thought I'd throw it in because so it's not lost, because it's also part of the risk, you know, sort of considerations. So, but anyway, thank you very much. Cheers.
No problem.
Colum, we've got some other comments and questions. A couple from Philip Holborn. He says, this is definitely a move in the right direction, but many times in the past, I've been thwarted in site access by line blockages getting refused. Either booked ones, but the signaller is too busy, and or they refuse simply because this hasn't been planned several days in advance. What work is being done with signalling centres to make taking line blockages, especially short notice ones, much simpler and much more available? And then he goes on to say, I've long been of the view that there should be a dedicated line blockage possession staff member in all large signalling centres to free the signaller from this task. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I certainly know that as part of the whole discussion, of course, you know, yeah, that for us in track inspection land, to move things into a green zone environment, we'll need more line blockages, not less. So if it's recognised that there are places where it's a real challenge to get line blockages today, getting them by the end of July is going to be even harder. So there's definitely, in parallel, you know, within each route, you know, there is signal workload assessments underway, and you know, that will come with a conclusion around what available workload or capacity is available, and then discussions will need to be had around how we resolve that conflict. Jordan may know more from a Kent perspective, but certainly that's where we're at the minute. And interestingly, and you know, I'm happy to say this because I think it's kind of there. Is Scotland did this move to reducing red zone working significantly, 6-7 years ago, and what helped them enable that was additional resource in the signal box. So that's a recognised challenge. I'm not cited yet on the detail around what the direct answer is to that, but certainly I recognise the challenge, and I think we'd all, it's key part of our risk assessment, and there needs to be mitigation actions put in place to balance that off, because you just keep getting line blockages refused day in, day out, and all that good stuff, because in the end we'll not be able to do our asset inspections, and we'll end up in a block the line situation, and none of us want to get there.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Colum, it's Jordan Faulkner. I was just going to add that where obviously it's taken a fair bit of time to get the initial sort of footprints for the line blockage, etc. in, but once we've got them in, it's actually having sort of unforeseen benefits that once you've got that cyclical access and you've got it, it's been making planning much easier. So we're finding that we can make best use of that access, because every other week on a Friday you're going to get access at that location, and this is what the footprint looks like, and therefore utilising that access is much easier than trying to sort of plan each one individually short notice. So it's taking time to get the footprints right, but once we've got them right, there are definite benefits on what we can achieve in the access we have secured.
Jordan, did you want to ask your question you put in the chat?
Yeah, it was a bit of a loaded question, because obviously I'm a bit on the front line with this column, but it was just you mentioned a number of alternative measures and proposals there, and it was just a question, or whether you can summarise whether all of the options you went through have been taken up by all of the engineering areas, or is it sort of area specific or as required?
I'd say it's still early days, so I think it depends on. I think it depends on the unique situation on each TME area. So I know some TMEs are still just working through their BVIs. They haven't quite even got past that stage yet, and they'll move into the others, when they're able to. And others are already looking at, supervisor inspections and hot weather. So I think where sort of my view is that I'd rather release stuff so that it's there when people are ready to use it, rather than, engineers will come, as you well know, Jordan, will come with I've got a problem now, I need it answered today. What I can't do is say, I'll come back to me in 3 weeks when I've gone away and think about it and come up with a proposal. This is sort of looking ahead, and I knew that lots of the stuff I've presented isn't going to quite be in the minds of a lot of TMEs just yet, because they're dealing with their immediate challenges, which is mainly BVI to start with, and then they'll move into the others. So I think it's just everybody's got their own unique challenges. Every patch is different with their own resources and availability of moving things to nights, and some people won't even look at it because they've been able to move their stuff around into line blockages during the day, because the train service allows them to do it during the day, so they don't need to make any changes at all. They just instead of sending their guys out at 9 o'clock in the morning, they send them out at 10 o'clock under a line blockage. So but then you've got other people who need to move everything to a nighttime line blockage, and that takes a bit more time. So it's available for everybody. There's been a varying uptake, mainly around for those reasons, I'd say.
Great, thanks very much.
We have a similar question, I think, from Phil Holborn again. The drone survey looks fantastic. Will the data be available to Capital Delivery and their contractors?
It's a really good question. So, well, absolutely. That's where we, the beauty of devolution actually is kind of, I'm the regional engineer for the region that includes Capital Delivery and maintenance and works delivery. So there is nothing at all anymore that should put barriers in the way. What I've shown is very early footage from, very early experiments. But absolutely, once we get up and running with, embedding, drone footage and the S&C video inspection and anything else that we do, PLPR images, my view is that that's all going to be on a platform of some description that will be readily available to whoever wants it, and it won't just be for maintenance staff. It will be made available to anybody who wishes to use it, because absolutely, why do we send people out to the same asset multiple times when we could just use the same information for multiple use? And absolutely, so it will very much be made available, and we will engage when the time is right to actually feed in with whether the information is as user friendly as it ought to be for everybody, and that'll be ongoing iteration to make sure that we can maybe tweak and change how we capture information in the future to unlock further potential.
And I think the footnote to that is making sure people are aware that information is available. Absolutely. As well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, Colum, I have to say thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation. And I know we went through it yesterday, and I still can't help but be impressed by the video footage. That really is something else. So thank you for that. I'll hand over to Jordan, who I think is going to do the vote of thanks. Jordan, over to you.
Great, thanks, Colin. Yeah, Colum, thanks very much for your time. To get an hour of the regional engineers' time, I know is not easy, and really appreciate your time to come along and support our Ashford section. We've been a bit scuppered with COVID and what have you, so we've just sort of on the sort of start-up phase for the Ashford section. So to get you to come along and give us some insight into all the work you're doing in this track risk-based management space is been really useful, and certainly I know from my time around the DUs, a number of our apprentices and such like are dropping in, looking at some of the PWI videos on YouTube, etc. So I'll certainly be pointing them in the direction for this one, and yeah, it's really good to give them an insight in the types of things that we're working on. Obviously, the rate of change going on at the moment is huge, and yeah, I certainly appreciate, and I know the engineers do, you know, what you and your team are trying to do to support them to be a few steps ahead to try and support them to what is achievable and what can be done as alternative measures. And certainly some of the new pieces of equipment and new methods are a challenge, and difficult to get your head around how we might best use those. But yeah, and I think the sort of the cherry on the cake was that drone footage, not something I've seen before. So I think you've definitely opened my eyes there, and really appreciate you bringing that along also. So yeah, my sincerest thanks, and thanks very much for your time and coming along and supporting us.
No
Really
problem
very
at all.
much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you, Colin. Very much appreciated. Very informative. Thank you for that. That concludes, obviously, the Ashford meeting today. Just a quick reminder, summer recess now, no meetings scheduled for July or August. However, September the 14th will be our next Ashford meeting. So we'll keep you posted on what, where and when. In the meantime, enjoy your summer. If you're going away, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all in September. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Colin.
Bye.
Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Thanks.